Most stories about violent crime start with hardened criminals who spent years sinking deeper into darkness. But this one doesn't. It begins in a peaceful Texas community, the kind of place people move to when they want safety, quiet, and a fresh start. What no one knew was that two teenagers were spiraling so fast that their paths would collide with three innocent lives and end inside America's busiest execution chamber. One of those teens would pay with his life. The other would walk out of court with a future. Same night, same crimes, same victims, two completely different fates, and the reason why goes far deeper than the murders themselves. Before anyone understood what happened in those final hours, the seeds were planted years earlier, in broken childhoods, reckless choices, and a decision that should have been harmless. Wanting a nicer car. What followed turned a normal October evening into one of the most chilling crime sprees Texas has ever seen. But the real question isn't just how the murders happened, it's how the justice system decided which teenager deserved to die for them. Before the murders ever made headlines, Michael Perry and Jason Burkett were already drifting toward disaster. They didn't grow up together, didn't come from the same kind of homes, and didn't even share the same kind of pain. But when their lives crossed, the combination was volatile. Michael's childhood looked normal from the outside. Loving adoptive parents, a stable home, people trying desperately to help him before things got worse. But underneath that calm surface, he was unraveling. Diagnoses piled up, behavior escalated, and every attempt to reel him back in only seemed to push him further toward chaos. By the time he hit his teenage years, Michael wasn't just troubled, he was unpredictable. Jason's path was different. His life started in violence and never escaped it. His earliest memories weren't of school or birthdays. They were of his father's fists, his mother's fear, and a home where cruelty was routine. Jason didn't grow up learning right from wrong. He grew up watching survival take the place of morality. Pain wasn't something he avoided, it was something he got used to. Two broken teenagers, both desperate for something better, ended up in the same orbit. Michael brought impulsive anger. Jason brought learned violence. Together, they fed each other's worst instincts. Individually, they were unstable. Together, they were dangerous. And it didn't take long before their conversations stopped being about everyday problems, and started drifting toward ideas that neither of them would have dared to act on alone. What pushed things over the edge wasn't some master plan or deep hatred. It was something almost embarrassingly small, two teenagers wanting better cars. That simple craving became the spark that turned their already unstable lives into a countdown. By the fall of 2001, both Michael and Jason were running on fumes. No money, no real jobs, no future goals, just drugs, frustration, and the feeling that the world owed them something. Every bad choice they made left them with fewer options, and every day pushed them closer to a point where even reckless ideas started to sound reasonable. That's when the Stoler family entered their minds. To Michael and Jason, the Stolers didn't look like ordinary, hard-working people. They looked like opportunity, a nice home in a gated community, two cars that seemed just out of reach for kids like them. In reality, it was nothing more than the result of a single mother doing everything she could for her son. But to two angry teenagers, it looked like wealth. And once they noticed those cars, the fantasy took shape fast. Take the keys, take the rides, leave before anyone even wakes up. No violence, no confrontation. Just an easy score for two guys who were tired of walking. At least, that's what they told themselves. But desperation has a way of twisting simple thoughts into dangerous ones, and the moment they started planning, they crossed a line they weren't ready to acknowledge. They weren't thinking about consequences or victims. They were thinking about speedometers, freedom, and the thrill of finally having something that felt like theirs. What they didn't know was that the first step toward the Stoler home wasn't just a bad decision, it was a decision that would pull three innocent people into their path. And once the plan set in motion, there was no stopping where it would lead. When Michael and Jason finally walked up to the Stoler home, their plan was shaky but still simple: get inside, wait until everyone was asleep, steal the keys, and vanish before sunrise. No one gets hurt, no one even knows they were there. But the moment Sandra opened the door, everything shifted. She recognized Michael from her son's circle of acquaintances, so she didn't see danger, just two young guys needing a place to crash. But then she mentioned something the boys hadn't expected. Adam wouldn't be home for hours. That single detail cracked their plan in half. They couldn't hang around without raising suspicion, couldn't wait for bedtime, couldn't pull off the silent version of their theft. So they walked back toward their truck, acting like they were leaving. But halfway down the driveway, something darker took over. Desperation started rewriting the plan. Instead of driving away, they circled back on foot. This time, they weren't pretending to be guests. They were intruders. Jason stayed at the front door to keep Sandra distracted. Michael slipped through the garage, grabbed the shotgun they brought, and moved inside the house like someone who had already made up his mind. He hid in the laundry room, inches from where Sandra lived her everyday life, completely unaware that someone was waiting for her in her own home. When Michael knocked from inside the house, Sandra walked toward the sound, probably confused, maybe thinking Adam had come home early. She never got the chance to understand what was happening. The first blast hit before she could react. The second ended the fight she never had a chance to win. Within minutes, a nurse who spent her life helping others was covered with sheets from her own home and carried out like she was nothing more than a problem to hide. Her body sank into Crater Lake while her killers drove off, believing the hardest part was over. But for Michael and Jason, this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something far worse, because they still didn't have the keys they came for. And that meant they'd be coming back. With Sandra gone and the keys nowhere to be found, Michael and Jason weren't finished. They needed Adam, the one person who knew exactly where everything was. So they drove off, picked up Jason's girlfriend, Kristen, and headed back toward the gated community. But this time, the problem wasn't inside the house. It was at the front gate. They didn't have the code. So they waited in the dark, rehearsing a lie they knew would work on someone raised to help others. A friend got hurt in the woods, they said. A simple emergency. Something two decent teenagers wouldn't question. And they were right. When Adam's white rodeo finally rolled up, Jeremy Richardson was with him. Two friends finishing an ordinary night, probably laughing, probably planning their weekend, not knowing they were driving straight toward a trap. Michael and Jason flagged them down with panic in their voices. Someone's hurt. He needs help. Follow us. Adam didn't hesitate. Jeremy didn't hesitate. They followed the truck into the woods because that's what good people do when someone needs them. Kristen stayed behind in the vehicle, frozen. She didn't warn them, didn't speak up. She just watched the boys disappear between the trees. Deep in the woods, the lie hit its breaking point. Jason turned first. A shot cracked the silence, and Jeremy never had time to understand he'd walked into danger. Then Jason went back for Adam. He asked if Adam heard the noise, playing on his fear, leading him deeper, step by step, until there was no way out. Moments later, Adam fell beside his best friend, two teenagers who had showed up to help someone and paid with their lives. Michael walked over afterward, searching Adam's pockets for the keys he'd been after all along, turning a place of friendship into a crime scene. Then the killers headed back toward the Stoler home, finally ready to take the red Camaro that had started everything. 3 innocent lives were gone. And while the families were already grieving without knowing it, Michael and Jason were just getting started. After 3 murders in a single night, the two killers didn't lay low. They didn't hide. They didn't even act like men running from consequences. Instead, Michael Perry spent the next 2 days driving around in Sandra's red Camaro like it was a trophy he'd earned. That arrogance became his downfall. On October 26, a police officer spotted him breaking a traffic law. What should have been a simple stop turned into a reckless chase through town, ending when Michael crashed the stolen Camaro and tried to run on foot. It didn't work. Officers tackled him, searched him, and found Adam's wallet still in his pocket, a detail so careless it stunned investigators. But the biggest surprise came when Michael opened his mouth. Instead of giving his name, he claimed to be Adam Stoler, the very boy he had just murdered. Police booked him under Adam's name and released him on bond, unaware they had already caught one of the killers they were searching for. Meanwhile, Sandra's body surfaced in Crater Lake. Suddenly, a missing persons case spiraled into a homicide investigation, and the hunt for Adam and Jeremy became urgent. Detectives had no idea the teen Michael pretended to be was already lying in the woods. Within days, the truth closed in on him. After another arrest attempt, Michael finally broke. In the interrogation room, he didn't just confess, he laid out every detail with a calmness that chilled even seasoned officers. The hiding in the laundry room, the shots, the bodies in the woods, even the nightclub celebration afterward. He described crime scene facts no one could have guessed unless they were there. And investigators had more than his words. A cigarette butt found under one of the victims had Michael's DNA on it. Witnesses placed him with the stolen cars. His story matched the evidence in ways he couldn't explain away. But once reality set in, once he realized what a confession to triple murder actually meant, Michael started backpedaling. First he said detectives pressured him. Then he said he lied because he was scared. Then he blamed everything on Jason, painting himself as a confused bystander dragged along for the ride. There was one problem. Every piece of physical evidence, every detail in his confession, and every witness statement pointed straight back to him. Michael could try to rewrite the story, but the truth was already locked in. And what came next would determine not just guilt, but who would live and who would die. When the case finally reached the courtroom, it wasn't just about proving who pulled the trigger. It was about deciding which of the two teenagers deserved the harshest punishment, and why. Prosecutors had evidence tying both Michael and Jason to every part of the murders. Same crimes, same night, same victims, but the way the jury viewed them couldn't have been more different. Michael walked into court with a reputation already stained by his actions. The stolen car, the fake identity, the confession he kept trying to reshape, none of it made him look like someone worth saving. He came off reckless, impulsive, and unhinged. Every time he opened his mouth, he dug himself deeper. Jason, on the other hand, had a built-in advantage he didn't ask for: his father. During Jason's sentencing, his dad, already serving a long sentence for his own violent past, took the stand in chains. In a trembling, broken voice, he admitted to the abuse, the trauma, the years of damage he inflicted on his son. It wasn't an excuse, but it was a window. The jury didn't see a monster. They saw a kid shaped by generations of pain. A kid who never had a real chance. And that single moment changed everything. Two defendants. Same murders. But the courtroom saw two different stories. Michael's jury returned with the ultimate punishment. Jason's jury did not. In the space of a few days, their lives split in opposite directions. Jason received life in prison, a future contained but still intact. Michael received a death sentence, punishment by lethal injection, the most absolute judgment a Texas courtroom can deliver. But the legal battle wasn't the end. Michael's fight was just beginning. His attorneys argued that his confession was manipulated, that his mental health issues made him vulnerable, that the evidence wasn't as clear as prosecutors claimed. Appeals piled up. Hearings dragged on. Each year brought another attempt to revisit the verdict, to change the outcome, to find one flaw big enough to open the door to freedom, or at least survival. But every court kept coming back with the same answer. The jury made its choice, and the choice would stand. Two teenagers walked into the same courtroom. Only one walked out with a tomorrow. While Jason settled into a life sentence, Michael's world shrank to a 6x9 cell on Texas death row. The same impulsive energy that fueled his crimes now bounced off concrete walls and razor wire. Some days he acted fearless. Other days he spiraled. But one thing stayed constant: he never stopped trying to rewrite his place in the story. That's when filmmaker Werner Herzog entered the picture. Herzog had spent years studying extreme human behavior, but Michael struck him differently. During their interviews, Michael swung between charm and panic, denial and strange moments of clarity. One minute he insisted he wasn't the killer. The next, he offered details that only the killer could have known. Herzog described him as a young man who seemed trapped inside his own mind, contradicting himself, chasing sympathy, running from the truth even when it was carved into court records. But behind the camera, time was running out. As appeals failed, the countdown began. Each legal door that slammed shut pushed Michael one step closer to the injection chamber. Family visits grew heavier. Supporters claimed he was innocent. Critics said he was manipulating everyone who listened. Even death penalty activists were divided. Some saw a damaged youth, others saw a remorseless murderer. By the final week, there was no more room for debate. On July 1, 2010, Michael was escorted to the execution chamber in Huntsville. He spent his last moments speaking quickly, almost desperately, shifting between gratitude, apologies, and religious promises. In his final words, he insisted he would see his victims again in another life, claiming they had forgiven him. It was a statement that stunned the witnesses, part comfort, part denial, and part something nobody could quite understand. Minutes later, the drugs took effect. At 28 years old, Michael Perry's story ended exactly where Texas law said it should. Jason Burkett, serving his life sentence, remains behind bars, alive because a single jury believed his childhood trauma made him less responsible than the friend he followed into the darkness. 3 innocent people died, 2 killers walked into the same courtroom, and the world is still left wondering, was justice served? Or did 2 broken boys take the fall for a lifetime of damage no one stopped until it was too late? The story of Michael Perry and Jason Burkett is more than just a tale of crime. It's a stark lesson in how fragile life can be, and how childhood, choices, and circumstance collide in ways we can hardly control. 3 families were shattered in a single night over stolen cars. Innocent lives were lost not because of hatred or revenge, but because 2 desperate teenagers saw opportunity and made choices that would haunt everyone involved. And yet, fate can be cruelly uneven. 2 boys committed the same crimes, but only one paid with his life. One jury saw trauma as a mitigating factor, the other saw guilt as absolute. One young man died in a sterile chamber, the other lives behind bars, carrying decades of guilt and memories that will never fade. This case forces us to ask difficult questions. How much of who we become is shaped by the past we can't control? Can a broken childhood excuse acts that destroy others? And when 2 lives diverge from the same moment, is justice ever truly fair? Some answers may never come. What we do know is that the ripples of a single night, October 24, 2001, still reach across decades, touching families, communities, and the very way we think about crime, punishment, and human fate. In the end, it's a story about choices, consequences, and the fragile line between life and death. And it reminds us that sometimes, ordinary lives can spiral into unimaginable tragedy in just a few hours, leaving the world to grapple with questions it may never fully answer.